Hello and welcome to NewsClick's Mapping Faultlines and our discussion on what's happening in the world today. We start with what is in everyone's minds. What's happening in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. These are the pictures, and of course the Gaza pictures have been coming to our screens for quite some time now. What we are seeing is a specific example of why this is being termed as genocidal by all humanitarian organizations and the United Nations. This is the distribution of food and other necessities to the Gaza population, which has received no food, no supplies for now quite some time. Hunger, desperation for medicine, for drinking water, this is what is stalking Gaza today. And the United Nations has said this is one of the biggest humanitarian disasters they are seeing right now. Now, what is also painful, and this is what the United Nations is talking about, is that the way the so-called aid is being distributed to the Gaza population. And for this, a special organization has been set up by Israel with American support. And this is the only agency which is allowed now to distribute food and necessary supplies to the Gaza population. Now, while this is something which might be thought of, okay, there is a humanitarian gesture on its part, Israel's part, the politics of this go far beyond it. First, of course, is the basic way it's being done. And every day we hear shootings of the people who are coming to collect aid on the basis that they have somehow overstepped some boundaries which Israel has set up, which nobody knows about. It's happening even a kilometer away from the food distribution centers. So it seems on one hand, in the name of distributing food, people are being called to come and collect it, but the supplies are very small compared to what the need is. More important than every day killings are taking place. Now, this is one headline. Again, 27 Palestinians been killed. There are some headlines which will say 40 killed. So as each day goes on, the so-called distribution of aid is coupled with people also getting killed. The amount of aid, this is the people mourning those who have died in trying to collect aid. What is the problem over here? And the United Nations, again, relief agencies who handle this kind of scenes have talked about it, that there are basic rules how this is to be done, where it is to be given, how the people are to be handled, what kind of help is to be given to the people, the need for medicines, to meet for specific kinds of food for the population which is starving. All this is known, experienced. United Nations relief agencies exist for essentially this purpose. Instead of that, a shadowy organization has been set up just a couple of days back, maybe a couple of weeks back, which nobody knows about. This is supposed to be an US organization. Again, there have been comments by one of the Israeli leading politicians that this is actually being funded by the Israeli government. And the purpose, and we'll come to that purpose, is something else. It is also to prevent any other aid agency being allowed into Gaza. And the United States, of course, is conniving with it, providing it an umbrella that one of its organizations, meaning registered in the United States, is the front for this aid. According to one of the leading politicians of Israel, who used to be a part of the coalition, is no longer there, he has said that this is something which has been funded entirely by Israel. that this is what it has set up for purposes which are not really to provide relief, but something else. Now, before we go to what the purpose is, I'll talk to you about what the United Nations is saying. And this is the Secretary General who said that he's appalled by the fact that the Palestinians are being killed while trying to collect aid. He also called for immediate investigations. We know that, of course, nothing is going to happen because even if it comes up in the Security Council, the United States is going to block it. So the basic issue is the fundamentals of the humanitarian principles of giving aid to a population which does not have food and medicine. That is something which is not being observed. So the question is, why is it not being observed? And here is the larger issue that, as we have discussed earlier, this is the area where the Israelis want the entire population of this rather densely populated area of Gaza to come here, which means compressing the entire population of Gaza into this narrow strip of land. So all the food distribution camps are set up somewhere here. And if people have to get food, then whoever in other places, then they have to come here. So the idea is not to provide aid, but to provide a temptation for supporting the migration of people here. Already they are under attack, they are being attacked, they are being bombed, and Israeli forces are trying to drive them towards this area. But if you do that physically, then of course you also suffer losses. And the IDF losses have been such that IDF forces today, those who are reservists, are refusing to come and join this continuous war that has been going on now for more than 600 days. So that is the reason that this so-called aid charade, according not to me, but to the United Nations and United Nations Secretary General, why this is being done. The purpose is not aid. Purpose is not giving succor to the people who are starving, but to attract them into this place and therefore vacate the rest of Gaza. And of course, once the people are concentrated there, it's easier then to say, okay, you can't survive here, so we will give you passage somewhere else. And therefore, clearing Gaza of all Palestinians. This is the simple target that Israel has, and the so-called aid distribution is really a part of that. Of course, we can talk about why we, rest of the world, are keeping silent. I'm not talking about individual voices which are being raised, but essentially the governments. There are some voices which are saying, oh, this is very bad, we should do something about it. But almost all the major powers who support Israel, militarily, financially, and politically, for instance, in the United Nations Security Council, all of them are unwilling to go beyond what would be called some notional gestures, saying this is not good. But are they cutting off money? Are they cutting off arms supplies? Are they cutting off the protection that they are giving to Israel's genocide in terms of letting its leadership come anywhere they want? Unlike the fact that if international courts ask that action should be taken, then you are supposed to take action. If somebody who's been charged with genocide and ICC, International Court of Justice, has agreed that what's happening in Gaza is genocide, then you're supposed to take action. None of them. Forget about really the bigger steps coming against Israeli leadership anywhere. But even cutting off aid, or even military supplies at the moment is not on the cards. And that's why the European Union and the United States, of course, the United States is the key party over there, remain the major protectors of Israel, supplier of arms, and also supporting it financially. And that is why Israel can behave with the impunity it is doing today. Of course, there are voices which are coming out in the world. Earlier also we had seen what was called the Freedom Flotilla, which used to go from some ports, from Turkey, from other places, would go towards Gaza. Of course, Israeli Navy would stop them, and people have died in some of these attempts. What is important here is Greta Thunberg, who's quite well known because of her climate activism. She is one of the persons in this boat, and therefore it has a certain degree of protection from what Israel can or cannot do. There are others. They're also one of the persons who was in the Game of Thrones. He's also here. There are other people who are also well known who are on the boat. But Greta, young woman, well known for her climate activism, being here does make an impact, because then it comes in the front page of every paper. And that is something which the Palestinian population, people in Gaza need. The people should not forget what's happening there. Of course, we know protests are taking place in different places. There are voices that are being raised against what's happening. The United Nations is one of those voices. But again, unless the Western world changes its position, the handful of countries which call themselves the protectors of the rule-based world. Remember G7, the rule-based world? Now that, unless they are willing to stop their funding and financial support to Israel, this is not going to stop. Of course, there is also the other issue. Okay, this is also the aid ship trying to break the siege of Gaza. And of course, we know that Israel is going to stop it at one point. But the problem for Israel is that it is there in public eye, and therefore there is a response in the world. What is the issue in Israel? For Netanyahu, 600 days of war has been a protection for him, that the court case which is there against him, which is corruption, that is not going to gain prominence. Nobody in the world is talking about Netanyahu's corruption case, but unfortunately for him, his trial has now begun. And if the trial proceeds to a level where he's convicted, then he might have to step down, something which he wants to avoid. And that is, according to a lot of his critics in Israel, is one of the reasons he does not want the war to stop, because that takes away the attraction of the people to what he has done as Prime Minister. I'm not going to get into the issue of what will or will not happen in this court trial. I do think the issue is really much larger than Netanyahu. I think the issue today is the kind of genocidal violence you're seeing not only in Gaza, but also in West Bank. And what we're seeing is finally the protection of the West towards Israel, and the fact that you have this nation built out of some other people's lands. The fact that this can continue to act as a gendarme of the West in the region, whether that is sustainable. And I believe that the Gaza people, with their sacrifice, has made it clear that Israel will continue to be isolated in West Asia. Whatever hopes it might have had of fitting into the larger West Asian matrix is not going to be there. And the fact that the West thought Israel could control West Asia for them, and therefore its oil resources, control the Suez Canal for them, Red Sea for them, those dreams are now not feasible. They are now shattered. And Israel will become an isolated entity, armed by the West, funded by the West, but isolated from the people of the region, countries of the region. Whether it happens in this war, whether it happens in the future, that's something we'll have to see. Yes, the Palestinians, particularly the Gaza population of Gaza, are paying a huge price for this. But nevertheless, for Israel, this victory, even if it wins a victory over the Hamas, over Hezbollah, over Syria, all of these are Pyrrhic victories, because what it has done has made itself clear to the world that they are today a state which is based on genocidal and ethnic violence. And I think that picture has become clear to the people of the world. We are not going to discuss in detail what's happening in other parts of the world. There is a presidential election in Korea. You might remember that the earlier president was removed because he essentially tried to have a coup against his own government and against basically the parliament where he had lost majority. So that having happened, we have a new election for presidential election, in which we have the candidate, broadly left candidate, Lee Jae-Myung, a conservative candidate, Kim Moon-soo, who are contesting the elections. And it does appear that we have the left candidate. Again, when we talk about South Korea, the left and right are relative positions. They are not left and right in a much larger sense of left and right. More left than, and he's more right. That would be the right way to put it. But definitely a part of the upsurge which replaced the earlier president, who had declared a dictatorship and military law, and a more conservative candidate who was close to the earlier president. These are the two choices that South Korea faces. It looks like you are going to see a more progressive candidate win. But if it happens, this will certainly help in getting closer to a peace in the Korean peninsula. Particularly the relations between South Korea and North Korea might see a reset, and obviously the kind of politics Mr. Trump might want against South Korea, against North Korea, and with not closer relations between the US and South Korea may not be so much on the cards. But nevertheless, with Mr. Trump, you cannot predict what he wants, because if you remember, he's the one who did start peace talks with North Korea. It's also true that the kind of economic war that he has let loose on the world, South Korea is also on his crosshairs. So we'll have to see how all of this pans out. We have also discussed earlier, Mr. Trump has upset the quote-unquote apple cart of international politics, and we are seeing new correlation of forces emerge in which United States of America wants to remake the world and only looking at itself at the moment. So I'm going to leave you here for now. I'll end with a young woman who has done her graduation from MIT, of Indian origin but American citizen, who gives in her graduation, in fact, she was selected by her class to speak on behalf of the class in this 2-day program in MIT, where people who are just passing out, who've completed their courses, are given their degrees. So on the first day, she was chosen by her class to represent the class. And this is what she says.
You have faced the obstacle of fear before, and you turned it into fuel to stand up for what is right. You showed the world that MIT wants a free Palestine. Last spring, MIT's undergraduate body and graduate student union voted overwhelmingly to cut ties with the genocidal Israeli military. You called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, and you stood in solidarity with the pro-Palestine activists on campus. You faced threats, intimidation, and suppression coming from all directions.
I'm going to stop here. I think her videos are available on the net, widely available on the net, and you can see what she's saying. She's been on the Indian papers because she's of Indian origin, though she was a US citizen, born US citizen. What is important is MIT is not particularly political as a place. It's a technical institute. and basically known for being one of the foremost places in the world on technology. That in these kind of places, American students are now calling for MIT to dissociate itself from Israel, I think is an important weather vane. It indicates where the wind is blowing, even in the United States. And the fact that this can happen in MIT, I think is very important. When it happens in liberal institutions, we know, okay, this comes from social sciences, students who are more politically aware and so on. But happening in technical institutions, I think it really shows that there is a perceptible shift in the world among the younger people regarding what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Palestine. And I think that's very important, because ultimately it is the youth today which are going to become the citizens tomorrow. And the fact that a young woman who can stand up, who can speak like this, I think speaks volumes for what's happening in the world and what's happening to the young people everywhere. I would stop here and hope that we in India can also show solidarity for the kind of struggles that are happening in other parts of the world. I know we have passed through a rather disturbing war-like scenario with Pakistan. Fortunately, it has resolved in a ceasefire. Of course, the tensions continue, the warlike noises on both sides continue, but nevertheless, the fact that there is a ceasefire brings us hope, because we are two nuclear-armed powers, and therefore any long-term struggle against each other with arms can lead to a much wider disaster, not only for ourselves, but for the world as well. So I think let me correct myself. I think we are entering a scenario where a lot of wars, small wars, are breaking out, which have the potential for becoming larger. There is an Iran-Israel ongoing tension with United States trying to negotiate a peace. There is a Ukraine war going on. All of this indicates we are entering a scenario, or we are entering in a period where we are going to see an enormous change taking place. And when such changes takes place, there are also dangers of much wider wars and disruptions. We hope the world will be able to overcome this. All of us put together can overcome this, and we can establish peace, solidarity with each other, and social and economic justice for the people in the world. With this, I'll end today and hope to see you next week again.